What motivates you to drive to Taco Bell? If you were to do that with other stuff, do you know how successful you'd be? Like, do you know what's stopping you from doing that one thing you've always wanted to do? You don't, because it doesn't exist. This is Josh Bauer, and no, it really doesn't exist. I have struggled with motivation for a very long time, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of people probably do as well. Okay, so during high school, it was a little bit difficult, especially during the COVID era of my high school. So for me, COVID overlapped with my senior year of high school, and it was the point where like we were all online for quite a while, a decent portion of my last. Well, I would say for me it was like the end of 11th grade and the start of 12th grade. There was definitely there's a decent point there, like a decent period of time where basically you had to do everything yourself, and you weren't even in a classroom. You're just at home doing everything, doing all your assignments and everything based on your own level of motivation. And to the extent that you didn't have that motivation, you didn't get anything done because there was not really anybody on top of you to make you get it done if you didn't open your laptop that day. You know what I mean? Like, when you open your laptop, there's like some meetings and so forth where there's like people on a screen telling you to do stuff, but it's just not the same. And so it brings back this concept of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, where intrinsic is either like you have the capacity or like the motivation is coming from within you, versus extrinsic where people are just on top of you, like get this done, get this done, get this done. And I listened to a very informative talk from a guy named Dr. K on this topic maybe a month and a half ago or so. And he was discussing intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, how it's almost like a switch in your brain. It's on or it's off. It's like you can't be, it's almost impossible for you to switch on a dime from being extrinsically motivated to intrinsically motivated. And this is one of the reasons why when you go to work, and depending on what type of job you have, if you have a job where you are basically just doing whatever you're told for most of the day, and then you come home, it's going to be very unlikely for you to actually get anything done, because for that entire day, your mind was in an extrinsic motivation mode where you are doing what somebody else tells you to. And so when you get home and there's nobody to tell you to do anything, you're just not going to do it. It's very hard to switch, to flip that switch from extrinsic to intrinsic. We're definitely within the same day for sure. But honestly, like if you go like multiple days over and over and over of just being in extrinsic mode, it's going to, even if it's a fresh day and you wake up fresh, it's just your brain is going to be so used to that. It's just going to be hard to switch. And so that's something I learned very recently, like a month ago, and I never knew that. And that's a piece of knowledge that I'm hoping to incorporate into my if you want to say plan, but my attempt to fix, maybe I shouldn't say fix, but to improve the way in which I get things done. But like I said, all the way back in high school, I've not only had this problem, but I've identified this problem and put a lot of mental energy into trying to solve it. And I'm actually holding a sheet of paper here right in front of me. That was my typed up version of a, what do you call this? Like a chart, not a chart, but a mind map, basically, of all these factors that affect each other. So basically performance was at the top of the pyramid. Now, when I say pyramid, this is not like a triangular shape by any means. It's more like, when I say mind map, I mean mind map. But performance is like the ultimate goal on this chart, right? On this diagram, performance is basically the North Star. Like, it's the thing that you want to aim to achieve. Now, this, I could take this into a more philosophical direction if I wanted to and say, okay, but at the same time, is performance really what you actually want to focus all of your attention on in life? And maybe it's not, but let's just assume for the sake of this that it is, and that a higher performance is better. So assuming that we're going to establish that as a given, or at least maybe not necessarily that performance is the only thing that matters, but that we're trying to increase our performance, right? We're trying to improve the quality of our performance and just increase the quantitative output, whatever that looks like, depending on what it is you do. Maybe that's a dollar amount of sales that you bring in for your company, which results in you making more money. Maybe it is sales of your own product if you own your own business. Maybe it is how many clients you're obtaining if you have a service-based business. It just depends on obviously what you do, what that is measured in. But with that said, assuming that's the case, what are the factors that go into increasing your performance? The main one is motivation. That's like, well, actually, okay, so I'm going to have to publish this online or somewhere so that if someone's interested, they can actually look at this, because there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to audibly describe what is on this chart, because there's literally 35, maybe 40 different things on here, and they all correspond with each other in different ways. But this is kind of going to be on motivation and energy specifically. There's a lot of other things that affect performance, but motivation, I think, is a super key one. If you have motivation, it's not true that nothing else matters, because technically there are a couple other things that matter. Okay, I'm just going to name a couple of them. So, financial resources, or just resources in general, but usually that comes back to being financial, because financial can usually obtain the other types of resources if you don't already have them. So I don't know, let's say you want to build a shed. Dollar bills is not going to build a shed for you. You're going to need tools, but you can buy tools with money, right? So money can't do everything for you, but if it can't do it itself, usually it can pay someone else or buy tools or other types of resources that can do it for you. Okay, so obviously that's a pretty basic one. And then you have time. You need time, right? And again, money can kind of buy you time in a lot of cases as well. You need to have a certain level of intelligence, and I would say you need to have also a physical capacity to do something. So if you want to, I don't know, swim across the English Channel, but you're missing an arm, well, that's probably going to be pretty difficult. So motivation is not the only thing that goes into performance, but it's what I want to focus on now. And the reason I want to focus on it is because most people have the other things. And, I'm not saying most people have a shit ton of money laying around, but at the same time, a lot of the things that you want to do when we're talking about performance don't require a whole lot of money. It would depend on what we're talking about, but let's just say we're talking about productivity and knocking out some tasks. Money is not really the thing that is going to do that for you. It's going to be motivation. So what are the factors that play into motivation? I'm just going to go down a list here. Directional clarity, number one. If you don't know what the hell you want, then how are you going to be motivated to get it? How are you going to be motivated to bring it about if you don't know what you actually want? So directional clarity is number one. Ease of completion. Okay, so you say you want to climb a hill. Compare that to, I don't know, climbing a mountain. Okay, I've been traveling a lot recently. Mountains in Pennsylvania are not quite the same as mountains in, I don't know, New Mexico. Let's say you look at in a different couple ways. In New Mexico, first of all, they're bigger. Second of all, they're a lot steeper. Okay, so let's just look at that. You look at a quote-unquote mountain in Pennsylvania, it's like a hill with some trees on it. And I have climbed them in Pennsylvania, and yeah, I'm out of breath by the time I get to the top. But at the same time, it's really just like walking up a big hill, like a really, 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 really big hill. You're not really climbing a mountain. For people that have lived here their whole life, they're like, oh yeah, we got mountains in our backyard. Yeah, they're not really mountains though, okay? My point is that when you look at a mountain in Pennsylvania, as I did, and I was like, hey, you know what? I'm bored, because this was back in high school. I lived in Pennsylvania for a little while. We had mountains all around us. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to climb up a mountain. And I climbed up a mountain. Actually, I climbed up two mountains, not in the same day. They were right across from each other. But, I was motivated to do that, partially because I was bored, but maybe that's not why I was motivated. But I was motivated partially by the ease of completion. I looked at that and I said, oh yeah, that's definitely obtainable. That's not too hard. And it's funny, by the way, because, I would think like, I would look at the top or what I thought was the top. And I was like, oh, I'm almost at the top. I would get there and I'd realize, oh, that wasn't the top. There's a new top. Because like the slope of it, you can't actually see the top. And that's why I'm saying these are like giant hills, is because it's like the slope isn't very big. And so you can't even see the top until you get to it. So honestly, most of it was like walking a very far distance and uphill enough to still make you a little bit out of breath, but not like super uphill. But I thought it was achievable when I looked at it because I said, oh, that's a small mountain. And so I was motivated to start and I was motivated to continue because it looked easy, right? If I look at a mountain, I don't know, out in the Rockies or something, or out in maybe Washington State, I was up there recently. You look at one of these mountains and they're freaking huge, right? They're pretty big. And obviously even those ones aren't as big as like some other mountains in Europe or Asia or whatever. But you're going to be less motivated to even start climbing that just because it's not as easy to start. Okay, I meant to go down a list of these and not spend too much time on each one until I got through the whole list. I'm not doing a very good job of that so far, but let's keep going. So far we have directional clarity and ease of completion. Something else I have here is a fresh start. Okay, so let's see here. A fresh start. A lot of times, if you're trying to do something and you're failing miserably at it, you're just not going to be motivated to continue. What's an example? I don't know. Let's say you're into boxing and you have a fight with somebody else. You're in the ring, right? And you have gotten like knocked out multiple times, and I don't know, you're on your last round. Maybe you haven't gotten knocked out literally multiple times, but you've gotten knocked down, okay? Because if you've gotten knocked out multiple times, you probably wouldn't be fighting anymore. But that's one of those situations where like, okay, you've gotten beaten up pretty bad and you are not going to be as motivated during that final round as you would be as if it were your first round, right? And your first round, you're like, you got a whole bunch of energy, you're ready to go, you're like, okay, I'm going to knock the hell out of this guy. But once you get knocked down so many times, you feel defeated, and it's just a feeling that comes upon you, and you lose motivation because you can feel that you're losing. You feel that your momentum is waning, and you feel like you don't have the upper hand anymore. Maybe it also ties into ease of completion, I suppose, but I guess it's a point that when you are starting out fresh, whether it's on a new idea or a new project or something, a lot of times you're going to be more motivated to put more time into it, not only because of the idea that you might not be defeated, but also just because it's new. And then because of that, I feel like it's a little bit of exciting. Now, again, these factors, just because they are factors, doesn't mean there's something you should always strive to increase every single one of these factors. I mean, a factor is a factor. It's neither positive nor negative. It's neither something inherently that you should increase or decrease. Some of them maybe you should increase, but just because it's a positive factor in motivation doesn't automatically mean it's something that you should strive more to do. That's a separate analysis that you have to do on its own. Right now, we're just discussing what are the factors. So, if you want to increase motivation, you could say, oh, well, I guess what I'll do is I'll end what I'm currently working on and start something new, and then my motivation will be increased. It's like, okay, maybe that will help a little bit, but at the same time, maybe that will give you more motivation to work on a new thing. But you have to come back to directional clarity. Like, is that new thing actually what you want to do? If it's not, and you're just deviating constantly for the sake of resetting your motivation to a higher default level, that would kind of, in my opinion, be the definition of climbing the wrong ladder. Like, because now, you still have to stick with the things that are important to you and not give up on them. So yes, a fresh start might increase your motivation. That doesn't mean you should cut off what you're doing and actually have a fresh start, right? But it's just something to acknowledge and, to keep in mind. Okay, another factor, successive momentum. Now, when I originally wrote this down, obviously successive I meant as an adjective, to describe momentum. Successive just basically meaning that the momentum you've had so far has been successful. Okay. So I don't know, let's say you're climbing the mountain and, the mountain in Pennsylvania specifically, and you keep getting farther and farther up. And while you're climbing, you're like, okay, I can see the top. I'm getting closer. Now, in my case, maybe I actually can't see the top. I just think I can, but let's pretend you actually see the top, right? When you see that you are making progress towards a goal, it helps a lot. And I think this one's important. I think this is something that, a lot of other people talk about, and for good reason, tracking where you are. So let's say you have a financial goal. Let's say you want to save. I don't know. Let's say you want to save. What's a goal of mine? And should I talk about it? Yeah, why not? Okay, so, well, I've had multiple goals, and the first couple ones were so unrealistic that I tuned them down to a point of being more realistic. So, I don't know. Let's just throw a number out there. Let's say, I don't know. Let's say you want to have $100,000 saved up by next year. Okay, cool. So track it. Track it and see where you are, and not just theoretically track. No, track right down to the very cent. Exactly every month, how close you are to getting there, how much progress you've made from last month to this month. Track it. And, this is a two-way street, because if you don't, and, if you track it and then you realize that you don't have successive momentum, well, then that might decrease your motivation. So you might say, okay, well, I don't want to decrease my motivation, so I'm not going to track it, because more likely than not, I'm actually not gaining that much momentum. Well, that's pretty bad, honestly, because then it's like you're in this state of unawareness. Like you don't even know what's going on. You have no idea how close you are to your goal. And I feel like that's honestly even worse than I feel like not knowing where you are is even worse for your motivation than knowing that you are in a spot that is not as good as what you're hoping to be in. I always have a rule that I will not lie to myself. And, this has played a lot into some of my beliefs and definitely some of the ways I operate, some of the ways I interact with other people, and a lot of the ways that I just see the world. And I will not lie to myself. And so one of the ways that you can lie to yourself is by intentionally withholding information from yourself. It doesn't have to be that you affirmatively tell yourself information that's not true. It is also kind of lying to yourself to withhold information from yourself with the purpose of continuing a belief that you think you want to hold on to, even though it might not be the correct one. What are some ways where this can play? I don't know. The one that comes to mind is religion, but let's not even go there for now. Let's say that you are just again, I'm gonna kind of keep bringing finances back into this, because a lot of times I think performance is specifically very related to financial performance, whether that's income or net worth. Okay, so let's be clear on that. And so with that said, let's say that I am in a financial position that objectively is not that great, but I decide that I'm not going to track my finances, because I want to continue in the delusion that, okay, I know I'm not doing awesome, but at the same time, it's not that bad, right? I'm still making a little money. My expenses aren't, it's not that bad. And you kind of have a feeling, you don't know for sure because you don't track the numbers, but you kind of have a feeling that it's pretty fucking bad. But you're not going to look at it. You're not going to track it. You're not going to track it down to the cent. And you're not actually going to write yourself reports and figure out where you are and what kind of progress you've been making, because then you're going to have to face a reality that, yeah, okay, something needs to change. And I consider that to be lying to yourself. If you're intentionally withholding information for the purpose of allowing yourself to be able to continue reasonably believing something that you have a feeling might not be true, but you don't want to learn is not true, then that's lying to yourself. And by the way, that applies in other contexts too. Now, at the same time, there are things that, and this is an interesting thing that I think about, not frequently, but every now and then, I think about information that maybe you don't want to know. Because trust me, there is stuff that I don't want to know. So, I don't know. I'm happy with not knowing what kind of crushed beetles go into red dye that's put into M&Ms, like stuff like that. Like, listen, okay, I was fine enjoying my M&Ms before hearing that information. Please, I just don't want you to tell me. Just please don't. I don't want to know what kind of gross shit is in these M&Ms because they taste good. I just want to enjoy my M&Ms. Okay, so there's some cases where ignorance is not necessarily bad, and I think it's up to everybody to decide that for themselves. But there are other cases where you really are just lying to yourself if you're intentionally ignoring things that you should be paying attention to. And so with that said, this is another situation where just because it's a factor that positively affects motivation does not mean that that factor therefore becomes your new, oh, I need to preserve this factor at all costs. And in this case, preserving your sense of successive momentum at the expense of honesty and keeping yourself in check with reality. I think that, yes, motivation is important. That doesn't mean you lie to yourself and tell yourself you're doing better in order to create some illusion of successive momentum so that you have more motivation. That's not how this works. Like, yes, some of these factors do play in positively. That doesn't mean you should sacrifice them to the expense of some other things. I think that's pretty... I think I've gotten that point across pretty clearly. Now, something else that will play into motivation is going to be optimism. So far we've discussed directional clarity, ease of completion, a fresh start, successive momentum. Now I'm coming to optimism. So I've kind of already discussed this a little bit. It was kind of implied mainly in the successive momentum. And by the way, not all of these are just only going straight into motivation. So for example, successive momentum on my chart here has an arrow that goes to motivation because it is a factor in motivation. It also has an arrow that goes to optimism, and then optimism has an arrow that goes to motivation. So some of these play into each other, right? And so when you're successful at doing something, that gives you optimism that the rest of it will be completed easily. And when you have optimism that based on your past success, the future is likely to also be a success, that gives you, well, I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but it gives you more optimism about the future. What happens when you have more optimism about your ability to complete the remaining steps? It basically just tells your brain that you're not going to be wasting your time and you're not going to fail if you do it. So why not do it, right? And ease of completion also plays into optimism in that sense. But I really tried to cover all the bases here. Like, successive motivation plays into it, but it also increases optimism, and optimism increases motivation. Next up is mood. Now, this is interesting, and honestly, this is probably one of the, not the only factor. Definitely, all the other ones I've talked about so far are very important, but you can have directional clarity tied with, something that's relatively easy to do. You know what you want. It's in directional clarity. It's easy to do, ease of completion. Successive momentum, you've done it a little bit before and you've done a good job at it. But if you're in a bad mood, you're just not going to do it. And mood, if I want to go into all the different things that affect mood, because it's on this chart as well, I guess I'll just briefly, and when I say briefly this time, I mean it, to run over them, but I'm not going to go very in depth. Stress, which, can be caused by conflict. It can be caused by adverse events. We also have music. Music positively affects your mood. Organization, right? Organization. Energy. Energy is a big one, and I'll talk about that later. Comfort, which comes from a couple of different things, like, it comes from that. It comes from health. Health comes from a bunch of things. What else affects mood? Self-confidence. That comes from a bunch of things too. I'm not going to go into that right now. Affinity? What does that even mean? Actually, I'm curious. I wrote down affinity affects mood. At the time, I obviously knew what that meant. Now I don't, so I'm going to look it up because I did this when I was in high school. Apparently, I had a better vocabulary in high school than I do now. Define affinity. Okay, a spontaneous or natural liking or sympathy for someone or something. Affinity, and I said that affects your mood. Okay. Interesting. Oh, okay. Okay, that's with something else. Okay, I'll skip past that one for now. Yeah, so the main things that affect mood: organization, comfort, self-confidence, stress. And some of those things come or are affected by other things like health. If you're sleep deprived, you're going to be in a pretty bad mood, just for example. So that's where health would go into affect your comfort, which would affect your mood, which would affect your motivation. Okay, so mood's a big one. And also energy goes into affecting your mood. A couple other things that affect motivation. Number one is recognition. So let's be clear about this. I would say it definitely positively affects your motivation. External recognition. If you have people maybe seeing what you're doing or cheering you on or holding you accountable, in a lot of cases that will increase your motivation to do something. And this kind of comes back to the extrinsic motivation portion of this. So when we say motivation, at the time I did this, I didn't really differentiate between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, but I guess some of these factors affect or increase intrinsic motivation, and others affect or increase extrinsic motivation. And recognition would be one that affects extrinsic motivation, increases it, obviously. You are more extrinsically motivated if people are pushing you to do it, or if you're trying to do it to please somebody else. I guess you could make a case that if you're doing it to please somebody else, that it's really a desire that's coming from within you. If they're not really expecting it, it's coming from within you maybe because it's a goal that you have. I don't know. I guess it depends on the context. But this was for sure the case in high school, right? Because I did much better in school when I was in person. Part of that is because if you don't do your homework, you have to basically sit there in front of the teacher and be like one of the only people that does not, pass their paper to you when you walk around and collect your homework. You have to look the teacher in the eye and tell them that I did not do my homework last night. It's so that's recognition. But there's also another aspect of that, which is accountability, which ties into external pressure, which ties into motivation, which I haven't gotten yet, external pressure. So yeah, I'm jumping ahead a little bit there, but the recognition aspect, I guess, in terms of being recognized for doing good things, as opposed to being penalized for not doing the things you're supposed to, there's specifically the recognition, which is when people acknowledge you and recognize you, basically, for doing things that are pretty impressive. So that ties into motivation. Another thing is immediate gratification. Okay, so this can be good. Some people try to do hacks to where, okay, if I do a certain amount of work during the next hour, then I will reward myself with this thing, whatever that is. Maybe it's a slice of cake. I don't know, whatever, floats your boat. I get whatever you can do to get your body to say, I want immediate gratification. In order to earn that, I'm going to do this. I'm not a huge fan of those types of hacks just because I feel like I would love to be able to be productive without having to trick myself into doing it. I would like to be able to do it just because I want to. So to the extent that you're like, okay, I'm going to reward myself with this if I'm able to do this not so fun thing, but thing that needs to be done. If it's the only alternative to not doing it all, then okay, better than nothing, I suppose. But at the same time, I really would prefer to be able to have a little bit more of a sustainable and resilient system for training myself or for motivating myself to do the things that I would like to get done more frequently. So there's immediate gratification, and not only as a reward for doing things you don't like, but I don't know, in some cases, so for example, what motivates you to drive to Taco Bell, right? Okay, Taco Bell is a restaurant that I love lately. Sometimes I'll just drive there, and the question is, okay, why? Why would you take the time to actually like get ready to leave, get all your stuff together, get your wallet, get your keys, all that stuff, get in your vehicle and make the drive, for me, like a 10-15 minute drive if I'm in Buffalo, to Taco Bell. Why? Like you could do that for a lot of things. Like if you, trust me, if you put that much effort into other stuff, like that's not that much effort. It's just getting your stuff together and going somewhere and making a face-to-face interaction with someone. In this case, Taco Bell has these kiosks, so really that interaction would just be when you get handed the food. But still, like, if you were to do that with other stuff, do you know how successful you'd be? Like, if you were to every, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a day do the exact same action, but instead, I don't know, let's say go to a restaurant and try to sell them on a product of one of your friends, and if they buy, you get a 3% commission. Like, like just walk into the restaurant and ask for the owner or ask for the manager, like maybe a smaller restaurant. Or if you were to walk in a store and ask if they'll sell one of your products, or I don't know, just some of these stuff that literally require, and when you live in a city, these places aren't far away, literally require the exact same amount of effort that you put into going to Taco Bell and ordering food. If you would do that on a more regular basis, probably be a millionaire already. But why don't you? There's no immediate gratification. Like maybe if they say yes, there's a little bit of a high, like, oh, I'm successful. And by the way, that plays back into the successive momentum, which is likely to make you do it more. But if you never start, then you never get that successive momentum, right? But why is it you'll go to Taco Bell? Because you're hungry. You want food. When you eat food, you are no longer hungry. So there you go. It's your immediate gratification. That is what motivates you to go to Taco Bell, but not to do the other thing. Now, if you're paid to do the other thing, well, then there's some semi-immediate gratification, depending on how quickly you're paid. If you're paid 2 weeks later, then it's not really instant anymore. But you get the point. Like, let's say it's instant. You get paid as soon as you go. Okay, well, now it's pretty obvious. You get money, and what can you spend that money on? Like, let's say you get paid to go to, I don't know, a store and try to get them to sell a product or something. Well, let's say you get paid as soon as you go. Now you have money immediately. Now you can spend that money on Taco Bell. Immediate gratification. But either way, like, there's an example of what I'm talking about there. It's not about how much effort. Don't get me wrong, that plays into it. But different types of tasks can require the same amount of effort, but something that has less an effect on your overall life, like Taco Bell, you can be more motivated to do it just because of the immediate gratification. I mean, this isn't really rocket science, but I think it's just interesting to think about. Like, if you put this much effort into other stuff in your life, where would you be? Right? Where would you be? Okay, external pressure, which comes from punishment, comes from accountability. Those two places, primarily. According to my chart, exclusively, but I'm sure it comes from other places too. But here, external pressure comes from punishment and accountability. Now, this is going to be the extrinsic motivation part. So, I don't know, let's say you got a speeding ticket. We're not talking about me here. Not at all. Let's say you're talking about a speeding ticket, okay? You have to mail a letter. Okay, cool. Take a stamp. In my case, I take an envelope, put it through my printer, print on the return address and delivery address. Envelope comes out the printer, all typed up and everything. Put the stamp on the envelope, put the ticket in the envelope, send it on its way. Okay, cool. You just mailed out a letter. Wow, that was amazing. Okay. What motivated you to do that? Well, if you don't do it, you're probably going to end up with a warrant and you're going to end up in jail. Okay, that's punishment. So punishment extrinsically motivates you to get something done. Okay, you were motivated to perform, right? You were motivated. So punishment played into external pressure, which played into motivation, which played into performance. So there's an example of punishment. Accountability, that kind of goes back to, me being in the classroom and having to look a teacher in the eye and be like, yeah, I didn't do my homework last night. So, whereas if you're, because of COVID, sitting home and you don't have to look at anybody and anybody in the eye and tell them that you're a failure and that you're lazy, then you're not really accountable. Or, maybe you do have to tell them, but you only have to tell them over a laptop, which just isn't really the same level of embarrassment for you, or it's not the same level of intensity, I guess. And so you're like, I'm not really stressing it. What are they going to do? There's probably 5 other kids that have done the same thing, so I'm not the only one. You kind of get off on that excuse, right? You're not really as accountable, and so you're not really as motivated to do it. Accountability and punishment, but both of those, again, this is extrinsic motivation. And this actually plays into something I've been doing lately. I've actually essentially hired somebody to keep me accountable to a very specific thing that I want to get done more regularly. And this is something that I was intrinsically motivated to do a while back, but for some reason it was a habit that just fell off. And I haven't been doing it very well. Let's just be straight here. I haven't been doing it at all for the past year. Thankfully, it's something I'm able to catch up on for the past year because it's more... Okay, so I'll stop being vague. This is keeping detailed track of my finances, right? So I've kept all my receipts for the past year, but I haven't done anything with them. So this is something I can catch up on. But I'm trying to I hired somebody to keep me accountable, both in catching up and also to continue doing it regularly going forward. And basically, this is something where I have failed miserably in having the intrinsic motivation to do this. Maybe that's because I was lacking some directional clarity. Maybe it's because I didn't have very much successive momentum, because kind of when I fell off this habit was when I was not in a very good financial spot in terms of income especially, and net worth both. And so maybe I felt like, well, what's the point in keeping track of money if I don't freaking have any money? So there's a successive momentum part of it, which also... the optimism plays into the optimism as well. It's like, well, the whole point of me tracking my finances was for me to, be in a good financial spot. I'm not going to be in a good financial spot regardless, so it's kind of pointless to keep track of my finances. Now I'm in a obviously much better financial spot, so that's turning around. Even though the optimism is back in a positive direction, the motivation is like used to not being there. I don't know. Like, I'm motivated to do it, but at this point, it's also a very difficult task. The ease of completion is not very high because I have a year backlog of receipts that I now have to put in before I can even start going forward from here. And so it's a high mountain to climb, and the motivation is not super easy at the same time. So this is where I'm trying to, I guess you could not substitute, because not like, I still want to have I still want the intrinsic motivation. I'm not trying to substitute it out for extrinsic, but I'm trying to compensate for my lack of intrinsic motivation with extrinsic motivation by staying accountable to somebody who I'm literally paying to nag me to get this done until it's done. So with that said, I want to say that extrinsic motivation is inferior to intrinsic. I do want to say that. And maybe it's a difficult generalization to make. There are definitely situations that require extrinsic motivation. I don't know. I mean, when you're driving a car and somebody pulls out in front of you, if you are, you're like, oh, I'm going to stay intrinsically motivated. I'm only going to do the things that I want to do and not be affected by other people. Well, listen, you're just going to plow straight into the car, and now you're either not doing very well in terms of bodily function, or maybe you're doing fine, but your car is gone. So yeah, I mean, there are situations where other people's actions necessarily must affect yours, which is the definition of extrinsic motivation. You basing your decisions and actions off of based off of other people, right? So it's not always a bad thing. And in some cases, it's necessary. And also, I mean, it's just way too simplified. It's way too simple to say that intrinsic motivation is the only thing you can use. Just because there's so many, it really depends on the business you have or the thing you're trying to get done. But there really are so many situations where you, on a daily basis, are basing like a large percentage of your actions per day off of things that go on around you and outside of you. If you work with individual clients, a lot of your actions that day are going to depend on what they want from you or what they expect you to get done. So all that is kind of extrinsic motivation, sort of, because you're staying accountable to them, right? They are your sense of accountability. Like if that person, I don't know, if your client died, well, first of all, you're not going to do work for them anymore because it's not going to serve any purpose. But second of all, like you're not going to be accountable to them anymore. So you're not going to complete the project. You see what I'm saying? But if you're doing something for yourself and the only reason you're doing it is because you want to do it, well, that motivation is going to stay there regardless. Now, my last and final factor that's going to play into motivation here is interest. Now, firstly, I should note that external pressure, which was our previous factor, negatively affects interest. External pressure positively affects motivation. Interest positively affects motivation, but external pressure negatively affects interest. What does that mean? It means that the more somebody is pressuring you to do something, the less that you want to do it. And again, this is going to come back to extrinsic versus intrinsic. Something that I wasn't even thinking about at the time, but really it beautifully displays itself here, because the more extrinsic motivation you have to do something, the less intrinsic motivation you have to do it. And this goes back to what I was talking about with this guy that was on a podcast I was listening to, Dr. K. I'm not going to pronounce his name because I would butcher it, but just look up Dr. K if you're interested in him. He's a very, very smart psychologist. And he was talking about how it's a switch. It's a switch in your brain. It can be on or it off, but it's not like they don't share with each other. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, they're not very good at sharing. So right now, like I said, I'm trying to use extrinsic motivation to get me to stay on top of my finances, on my financial tracking here. But eventually, I really would love to put this back into the space where it originally was, which is where I do it because I want to do it and because I want to stay on top of it. In the meantime, that hasn't been working out very well, so I'm doing the second best option, which is keeping myself accountable and keeping myself extrinsically motivated. But eventually, I would love to put this back into the intrinsic category. But the more, I don't know, what's an example? Let's say, okay, I love geometry, right? In math geometry class in high school, I had, I believe, a 98 average for 3 quarters, 100 average for one of the quarters. I got a 98 on my geometry Regents exam, which, granted, I went to a private school while I was getting these good grades. Honestly, I think that private school was harder in terms of getting good grades than public school for some of these actual academic classes like math and science and whatnot, just because they have a high intellectual standard there, high academic standard. And at public schools, I think it's a little bit less so for one reason or another. But with that said, even if you were under the impression or the bias or whatever, like, oh, well, private schools, they have, let's say that you didn't believe what I just said and you said, oh, well, you went to a private school, of course you're going to get good grades. They want everyone to pass. It's like, okay, fine, but this was a state Regents exam. This was like not just one approved by the state. This was made by the state of New York. Every kid in the state took these Regences. And I got a 98 on it, and apparently that was like super good or whatever. Proofs. I like proofs a lot. There's a perfect example of something I was intrinsically motivated to do because I loved it so much. Now, let's say, and this wasn't the case with this, but let's say for some reason that people were, I don't know who people would be, maybe my teachers, or yeah, I guess that's really the only relevant example here. Let's say my teacher, she was a good teacher, by the way, was on top of me to do way better than I already was. I mean, it was easy for me, so I'm not saying my grades would drop because, I don't know, you would have to like make me stupid in order for my grades to drop, or make it to where I didn't want to do anything at all, but because it was so easy to complete, right? Ease of completion, that just wouldn't really make sense. So it's unlikely my grades would drop. But that said, it would still, if I was like forced or pressured a whole bunch by my teacher, maybe to get stuff done sooner, I don't know, that's a good example, then I feel like I would definitely start to lose interest in doing it on my own. Like I would actually do like extra project or extra credit stuff and things like that for this class and do things like just for fun on my own. And that's typically unheard of for something like geometry, but it's because I liked it so much. I was so interested in it that I was motivated to learn it and do it super, super well. But external pressure is something that would decrease your interest. What's another example? You know what? Let's say chess. Okay, I like chess a lot. Chess is something that I love playing. I love playing chess with people on my own time, and I don't really play against a computer. But if we're talking like a situation where I am not around my friends at the moment, sometimes I'll play online. But either way, like I'll play on my own time, right? There are some people who take chess and turn it from a hobby into a commitment, or into a commitment, something that they're expected to do. When you have to show up to a chess tournament because it's scheduled and because you paid to be there, it's like, to me, it just takes the fun out of it. Like, you're forcing yourself to do something. You're committing to something that is supposed to be fun. And there's a good example, when you have to do something, even that you otherwise would have liked, or when somebody is pressuring you to do it or trying to force you to do it, you just automatically lose interest. I feel like that's pretty. I think most people would agree with that. Probably most people have also experienced that. So it's like you have to pick your type of motivation. You're going to be intrinsically motivated, or you're going to be extrinsically motivated. Now I'm just going to throw in a little anecdote here from a couple different jobs I had. So the first job, I was a sales representative for a meat distribution company, and we had our products in many of the top stores in Buffalo. I was in charge of 6. I was a sales rep for 6 of these top stores, and I would make sure that all the deliveries went smoothly, that the product was always in stock, that everything that was in the stores from our brand was not expired, and that if anything did expire, that it got moved off the shelf quickly and replaced with a newer product. Or if things were expiring frequently, I would make sure we stopped carrying them in that stores because they're not selling well, that sort of thing. It's more, I don't want to say physical labor, because like it doesn't, like, other than maybe a little bit of carrying boxes, it's not, and even that, it's really just moving them like from the truck to the cart and then you're done carrying them. It's not that much work. Okay, but you're moving around, you're walking around, you're positioning things. It's more of like a physical type job than it is a mental job. Like, there's yes, you have to use your brain for some things, but like, it's not super mentally challenging, okay? But it's also not physically challenging. It's not really consuming much of your energy necessarily. But I would get home from that job and I would feel lazy. I would feel like I didn't want to do anything the rest of the day. And I would only be working like, 8, 9 hours. And I didn't really understand why. I ended up with a new job, not because of that, but just for other reasons. I was a property management, I was an assistant property manager for a company that owned a bunch of rental properties, and that was a super fun job. But this was interesting because while I was at that, while I was on a job for that 8 hours approximately, I would have a checklist of things that I had to do. And keep in mind that this was early on, so I was wrecking my brain trying to learn all the things I had to learn. They had all these different properties. They all had different names. They all had different layouts. And I would be answering phones and trying to suggest vacant units to prospects that call in. I would also have to qualify prospects and make sure that they are actually tenant worthy and that they actually would qualify to be in one of our apartments, so that I'm not wasting their time and so that they're not wasting mine. And, for the first couple months on the job, this was a bit mentally challenging to learn all this stuff, which was fun. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it a ton. I love that job a lot. But my point with that is this. When I get home from that job, I feel energized. Like, I feel motivated to get done a bunch of stuff. And I couldn't figure out why. I was like, this makes no sense, because at my last job, basically, I didn't have to use my brain very much at all. It was a little bit of physical stuff, but not that much, like not enough to drain me, and then I get home after 8 hours and I'm like, I don't feel like doing anything. This new job, I am tearing my brain apart trying to learn all this new information, talking with people a whole bunch over the phone, talking with coworkers, and sometimes arguing over stuff, friendly arguments, like, would this tenant make when I say argument, I guess I mean that, like, not literally, but like, just us like going over the different factors. Like, would this make a good tenant? Would this not make a good tenant? Okay, well, their credit score is here, but also their income is here. Okay, all that stuff. Sometimes we would make exceptions. Sometimes we'd have to get approval. So like a lot of different conversations, different, a lot of interactions with other people, and a lot of technical and just a lot of aspects of that job that required use of your brain. A lot. Remembering when you go to a showing which keys you need to bring, because keys, oh my gosh, when you work for a company who owns like 8, 9, 10 different buildings with, I don't know, an average of like, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 apartments per building, like keys. Okay, just the keys were enough to like make probably an average person's brain explode. And so this is a job where my brain was constantly in use for the entire 8 hours. I would get home. You would think my mental energy would be drained, but instead I would feel like more energized by like 5x any day that I was getting home from the past job. And I couldn't figure out why. But then I listened to this podcast, the one I was talking about before, from this psychologist, and he talks about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and how there's a switch in your brain it's either on or it's off, and it makes so much more sense because all the stuff that I would do in the first job was mostly extrinsic motivation. Like, okay, I just got an update from the driver. He's going to be at this store at this time. Because he's going to be at this store at this time, I need to be here to meet him, to get the products, to distribute in the store. Okay, this store manager just texted me and asked me for 3 more oven gold turkeys. I'm going to have to get them to him today because it's Friday and we don't work in the weekends, so we have to do it before the weekends, or else they're going to be out over the weekend, which is not good because it's a high-selling store and we want them to have our best product, which is oven gold. We don't want them to be out of stock, so I have to get that done today. I remember there were some, and don't get me wrong, I love the urgency of that. Like, it's fun while I'm doing it, but then when I get home, it's like I was responding. It's almost like you're swatting down bullets. Like, okay, a bullet got shot at you. Like someone shot at you, and I don't know, you have like a shield and you're just swatting down bullets. It's like, okay, that came at you. I took care of that. Okay, that came at me. I took care of that. And I took care of that. I took care of that. Everything's good. But these are all bullets that are flying at you because other people have requests of you. Other people have demands of you, and you have to arrange your schedule around what is around the people that are around you, basically. And there's really no intrinsic motivation in that job. It's just all responding to things outside of you. In this new job, yes, there are some showings which are on your calendar, and I guess you could, like apartment showings where you show prospective tenants the apartment if they have qualified as a lead, if they've qualified as a prospect, right? Yes, so you could call that extrinsic. However, a majority of my day was me having tasks that I needed to complete and me completing them in the priority that I deem appropriate. Usually, sometimes there would be something that gets expedited to the top at the request of my, at the request of the senior property manager. But usually, for the most part, I had a decent amount of autonomy in determining what tasks were most important or which ones I should do first, based not only on importance, but also on ease of completion. Maybe something's a little bit less important, but it'll only take 2 minutes to do. Let's just do that and get it out of the way, sort of thing. So a lot of intrinsic motivation, not only in terms of things like tasks that were requested of me, but honestly, mostly maybe not mostly. If I were to think of a percentage, maybe 60% of tasks that were always on my list were requests of me by a coworker or a manager, and then the other 40% were things that I wanted to do, like either something that makes my job easier or honestly stuff that made my coworkers' jobs easier. For example, one of my coworkers, I synced her personal Google Tasks to her work Google Tasks, which is not something you can do right through Google. It has to be done through an external service called, taskboard.io, if I'm not mistaken. Something I got free lifetime access to like years and years ago for making a YouTube video about them. So like I have a free lifetime subscription. I basically use that to just basically voluntarily, like I just offered to do it, like make her job easier. And it it took maybe 2 hours to do it because, I had to, she had to log into it herself and all that stuff. And I had to do that with her. But I mean, there's just a good example, like both making things easier for me, also making things easier for my coworkers. I designed a business card for me, which was not necessary, but I did it because I wanted one. I also designed a business card for some of my coworkers. What else? Some things I can't even remember, I'm sure, because it was a while ago now, but just things that improve the process there, right? And let's see, I remember offering to take like aerial videos of some of these apartments to improve their marketing material with my drones that I have. So like just stuff that was entirely, I was thinking of myself. Like, I love this company. I want to help this company improve their, lower their vacancy, right? Improve the quality of their website. And I wasn't the guy that was like in charge of their website. They had their own marketing guy specifically for that. But I liked this company a lot and I wanted to help them improve. I was invested in them. And so a lot of the things I was doing there was I was intrinsically motivated, right? I wanted to help them. I wanted to make the company better, make my own job easier, make the jobs of those around me easier. And then, you have to do an apartment showing here, an apartment showing there, and obviously answer phone calls as they come in. Usually, we kind of had like an unspoken rule, like, I guess the people lowest down in the chain would be the ones to answer the phone calls whenever possible, and that would be me and one other coworker that was there. We were both like, I was like an assistant property manager. She was a leasing agent. So we were both like, it was only like, in terms of office staff, there was only like 5-6 of us. So it was a relatively small office operation, right? And as much as possible, the senior property manager would not answer phones unless one of us weren't able to take it. So like, typically speaking, her and I would try to balance it out so that like not one of us is taking all the calls. Like we try to split it 50-50 as much as possible, but it's more like an unspoken rule. Like you wait 1 second before you answer it, maybe like one ring. And depending on how many calls the other person has picked up that day compared to you, maybe you wait 2 seconds. If you're doing something important, maybe you wait like 4 seconds. And if they still don't pick it up, you're like, okay, fine, I'll stop doing this. I'll pick it up. Or if you're like on a call with somebody else, because usually the other person's in the other room, and they don't know, they can't like see you that you're on a call. So then you just don't pick it up at all because you're literally on a call with someone else. You can't pick it up. So, but it's one of those situations where like, yeah, you could say that when you get a phone call, that's extrinsic motivation because now you're doing something based on someone else. But what I would do is I would have a notepad where like I write down everything that happened on that phone call. A lot of times you don't have to take care of that right away. So sometimes I would just set that notepad aside, go back to what I was working on at the moment. And depending on when that needed to be taken care of by, I would just set it off to the side until I'm done doing what I had to do. Done doing what I wanted to do, I should put it that way. But what I wanted to do, it was like something that was actually obviously, still important in terms of having a positive impact on the company. And so there's a perfect, and then if, the phone call was super urgent, then I get it taken care of as soon as possible. Either call a maintenance guy if it's something that needs urgent maintenance attention, or if it's something that needs, I don't know, like if it's urgent, get it taken care of, and then as quickly as I can go back to what I was doing. So all that is to say, throughout the entire day, my brain was always in intrinsic motivation mode. And then I would get home and then I would just keep that momentum going and just cross off a bunch of tasks. And I was doing pretty good just in life in general at that point in time. And I don't know, I feel like that's just an interesting thing that I learned. And I kind of put all the pieces together when I learned like, okay, the switch is on or it's off. And so when the switch was on for the first 8 hours of my day, it's going to also be on for the second 6 hours of my day, or 8 hours, however long I decide to allocate towards, being active during the second part of the day. And I don't know, I just found that interesting, I found that to be interesting. Just to kind of briefly go over the rest of what's on this sheet, even stuff that does not apply specifically to motivation, but stuff that I think might be interesting. So technically, there are a couple things that go into performance. So there is physical allocation, which is affected by motivation, capacity, and coordination. So motivation, we've already gone over in depth, obviously. On this chart, I don't have motivation directly affecting performance. Motivation affects physical allocation, and then physical allocation affects performance. So I don't know. Let's say, I don't know. Let's go back to the example of swimming across the English Channel. If you're missing an arm, right? Maybe it's possible. Maybe somebody has done it, and if so, that's pretty awesome. But in that case, physical allocation is what you need in order to perform. The allocation of physical resources, basically your body making movements. If you're writing, you're doing that either with your fingers and your arm, writing on a sheet of paper using your hand, or you're typing on a keyboard, or maybe you are talking into a microphone, text, or a speech to text, in which case you're using your mouth and your tongue, which is part of your body, and your vocal cords. So you need a body to do any of this in the first place. And so that right there, the physical allocate, the physical, can you allocate your body towards something? You need motivation to do that. You also need coordination. You need to not be, clumsy, right? Depending on what it is you're trying to do. If you can't swim, it's probably, maybe you have, so coordination, capacity, and motivation, right? You want to swim across the English Channel. Let's say you have both arms, but if you're clumsy and you don't know how to swim, you have the capacity, you have both arms, you have the muscle, but you don't have the coordination. You might have the motivation and you might have the capacity, but if you don't have the coordination, you can't do it, right? So you need all three of those things. Capacity just means, again, you have all your limbs. You can't talk if you don't have, if you lose your tongue, maybe you can't talk very well. That sort of thing. You need the literal capacity to do it, and then you need the coordination to do it, and then you need the motivation. Okay, so those all go into physical allocation. Physical allocation goes into performance. What else goes into performance? Resource allocation, which comes mostly from financial standing. And then we have time allocation, which goes into performance. Time allocation comes, time allocation is, well, I'm just going to leave that there. There's a couple factors on that one, but they're not really important. We have mental allocation. Now, this one I think is interesting. So here's another little set of bubbles that all connect around to each other here. Two factors go into mental allocation. So basically, you have to not only allocate your physical actions in order to perform, but you have to have a brain behind it as well. You have to have some sort of coherence, right? And so the two factors that go into what you're able to mentally allocate while attempting to perform are intelligence and concentration. You have to be intelligent, and then you need to be able to focus that intelligence in order to get the job done. Concentration is negatively affected by distractions, concerns, and alternative projects. If you got other stuff going on, then it's going to take away from your ability to concentrate on the project at hand. If if there's a bunch of things jogging around your mind, if you're worried about something, that's a concern that's going to negatively affect your concentration. And if there are a bunch of distractions flying at you from all different angles, your phone and social media and just dumb stuff like that, then that's going to negatively affect your concentration. Even if you are super intelligent, if you cannot channel that intelligence in the proper place and at the proper intensity, it's not going to do you very good. Not going to do you much good. Now, intelligence is going to be affected by knowledge and cognitive ability. And there are two different things in my opinion. Knowledge is how much you know. Cognitive ability is your ability to reason and your ability to think and your ability to draw conclusions and just to reason. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. Your ability to think, right? You might you might not know much about a certain thing. But if you're a smart person, like if you have a good cognitive ability, you can probably learn about it. You can probably learn what you have to. On the other hand, you can memorize a bunch of facts and still be not very intelligent because you don't know what any of that means or what to do with those facts. And so cognitive ability is important, not just knowledge. Knowledge, let's see. Knowledge comes from exposure, right? You can't know something if you never hear it. You can't know something if you've never had a means to learn it, then you can't know it. It's literally impossible. I mean, even stuff that you feel like you know without ever having been taught, you've been taught, you just don't remember exactly when you were taught it or how you were taught it. Or maybe you were taught it when you were 2 years old and not even taught it because somebody taught it to you, but just because you observed the world around you and you learned, oh yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't even think of a good example. I mean, you walk out and you go outside and like it's bright out and I don't know, it's not pitch black in the daytime. Like certain things that's like nobody taught it to you. You just know because you have experienced it over time. It's still coming from exposure. So if you don't know very much, it might not be a bad idea to increase your exposure to knowledge. Books and podcasts are a great way to do that. And in terms of cognitive ability, oh gosh, this is affected by a bunch of stuff. So let's see here. Okay, number 1, it's affected by your health. Number 2, it is affected by your practical experience. Number 3, it's affected by your favorable genetics. Number 4, metacognition and self-repair. Oh, that's an interesting one. Okay, so health. Yeah, I mean, listen, even if theoretically you're a smart person, if you are sleep deprived, if you don't have enough, if you don't eat enough, if you don't, well, I don't know how much, I'm pretty sure exercise is going to play into mental capacity as well, cognitive ability specifically. Sleep, good diet, exercise, like just the basic stuff, then your cognitive ability is going to be affected. And even if you're motivated to do something which, health, which is affected by food, sleep, exercise, is going to affect your energy, which is going to affect your mood, which affects your motivation, which affects your performance. So like even if you are motivated, which by the way, motivation itself is affected by health. So in other words, it's unlikely you'll be as motivated if the health stuff isn't in place. But let's say somehow you are, your brain literally does not have the fuel that it needs to execute stuff as well as it could compared to if you were in a healthier state. And maybe some things you don't need to be super smart in order to get them done. But, if depending on what you're trying to do, that certainly doesn't hurt. And so health is an obvious one that I think affects cognitive ability. Practical experience. In other words, I mean, you need experience. Like your ability to reason and to think is going to improve with time as you think about things more often. And also, just in general, there's going to be kind of the idea of wisdom, which obviously, is a little bit different than knowledge. But when you've seen something happen before, maybe you don't have like factual textbook knowledge to say every time A happens, B is going to happen. But you just kind of get a sense sometimes when something isn't right, or when you're probably going to have to do things differently, or when something is going in a negative direction. You just kind of have a sense. And so that kind of ties into practical experience. And, having those experiences can help you avoid negative outcomes down the road. I think that the practical experience plays into your cognitive ability. I think that would kind of play into the wisdom aspect of this, right? Now, maybe, having that experience does not actually directly affect your ability to think necessarily, but what it does is it improves the quality of your conclusions for sure. And based on information that's not necessarily just hard knowledge, but rather actual experience that's kind of ingrained into your brain. Favorable genetics, I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. If you're born dumb, sometimes there's really just not a lot you can do about that. You can still do what you can with what you have. I mean, think of the example, maybe if somebody doesn't have an arm, if they, really are determined, sometimes what you lack in one thing, you can make up in another. If you lack the capacity, in the physical allocation aspect of this, you might be able to make it up in motivation. If you really, really want to, you might be able to swim across the English Channel with one arm. I don't know if you can or not. I wouldn't be surprised. People have done crazier things. And so on a similar note, you might not be born the most intelligent person in terms of your ability to think well and clearly and make good decisions and be decisive. And decisions definitely play a big part of success in life, not only making them, but making good ones. And if it's a little bit harder to think, if you're not as good at that, then it's going to be harder to make decisions, and that's a setback for you. But, I'm not saying you're doomed, because again, what you lack in one thing, if you're very, very motivated, trust me, people, what you lack in one thing, you can make up in another. But it's just factual that favorable genetics, you want, it's going to play a factor in how well you can think, which is going to play a factor in how successful you are. It doesn't mean it's the only factor, but it means it's a big one, right? And some things like that you just can't affect. There's nothing you can do about it. Once you're born, there's nothing you can do. Now, can you make sure that if you're going to have kids with somebody, that the person is smart so that your kids end up with favorable genetics? Well, that's a favor you can do to your kids maybe. But once you're born, there's nothing you can do for you, right? Also, enough on that. Metacognition and self-repair. How well can you detect that you are messed up? And upon such detection, determine and decide how to fix that. Determine to fix it and then decide how to fix it. Like, first of all, 3 steps here. Number 1, maybe 4 steps. Number 1, you need to be able to identify that you are messed up in one way or another. Specifically your brain, right? Be like, okay, I'm not thinking about this right. How should I think about it? Okay. Step 1, identify that something about your cognitive process is messed up. And when I say that, I just mean the way you think about a certain thing. Maybe the way you've been taught to think about it or whatever. Step 2 is determine that provided it's messed up, you're going to fix it. Step 3 is determine how to fix it. Step 4 is actually fix it, right? And if you can do that, I would say, here's the thing. Okay, see, this is interesting because for me, it's a circular feedback loop on this paper. So I don't want to say you're either born with it or you're not. But I would say that this is something that as you do it more, you get better at it. And when you get better at it, that means you'll be able to do it more, if that makes sense. Think of I'm recording on this microphone right now, and I think it's a little bit more echoey than it typically is, which is because it's actually my first time ever recording on this microphone in particular. And so I was looking up a little bit earlier on YouTube how to avoid feedback, which is completely different. Feedback is like when you have speakers that are playing out in an audience in a big room or something, and the sound from the speakers is getting caught by the microphone again, and then it turns into an infinite feedback loop, right? And that's not a problem I have with this. The problem I have with this is just reverb off the walls, because I'm recording in my kitchen right now, and my kitchen, it's like all blank walls, and it is what it is. I'll try to fix that maybe in the future. So that's not the problem I have, but it was another problem of like in a big situation or in a big room, you'll have speakers that are getting caught by the microphone, and then it's getting pushed back out through the speakers, which is even louder than getting picked up by the microphone again. It's an infinite feedback loop, and that is similar to what I'm talking about here, where you have a cognitive ability, which is your ability to think logically. And then you have your ability to, your ability to, or maybe your proclivity to audit yourself, right? Self-audit. And if you have both of them, that means that you are going to audit the way that you think, which is going to improve the way that you think, which is going to increase your ability to audit the way that you think. And I feel like it's an infinite positive feedback loop, which is why I put it there. And then, by the way, knowledge, going back to knowledge, also positively plays into interest, which, of course, interest was one of the things which positively plays into motivation. So a lot of these things interconnect. And this is a super interesting chart to look at. And a lot of times when I'm not very motivated, I will look at this chart and I'll be like, what is missing for me here? Because, what are some of these factors I can improve on? And that's why I made it in the first place. I was in high school. I said, I'm not getting anything done. Listen, I was literally failing multiple of my classes as a senior in high school. And it was mainly because I did not have the same accountability to the teachers. So obviously when we're talking about homework, nobody does homework except for me in geometry. But that's even for me, that's rare. Every other class, like I don't even do homework because I want to do it. I do it because I have to. And that's the same for just about everyone, whether it's high school or college or whatever. You don't do shit like that because you want to do it. You do it because if you don't, you're going to fail the class. If you don't, you're going to get embarrassed when the professor comes around to collect the assignments, whatever. It's extrinsic motivation. It is external pressure. It's accountability, which leads to external pressure, which leads to motivation, right? But in high school, because of COVID, I was sitting at home. I didn't have a teacher to look at me in the eye and make me feel like a piece of shit. And so I got away with not doing stuff and not really having any accountability for the fact that I didn't do it. And so that resulted in I passed everything, but by slim margins in my senior year of high school. And it was kind of funny because of how good my grades were for the rest of my 3 years in high school. And then that one, everything just went to hell. But it was funny, but I just lost all motivation to do anything. And that's why I made this chart. It's like, okay, you almost got held back your last year of high school. And then I made this, I don't remember if I made this, I think it was towards the end. I'm pretty sure it was towards the end. I was like, I want to make sure this doesn't continue to happen, and I want to know why it's happening. And this plays into the metacognition and self-repair aspect. I mean, I would say that this, at least in my case, represents a very good example of me identifying a problem with my way of thinking and trying to repair it. Just the fact that I made this whole chart in the first place. And you identify a problem and you try to fix it. And in my case, I was trying to lay out every single, and by the way, I made a commitment when I made this, is that I would not use the internet at all to think of any of these factors. Just basically my own experience, write down all the things that you think play in to motivation. I didn't do any research on this or any bullshit like that. It's like, based on my own experiences, what have I observed? And this was way before AI, by the way, just throwing that out there. But forget about AI. I didn't even use Wikipedia or Google, any of that. I didn't try to look this stuff up. I was like, based on my experience, what plays into motivation? And this is what I came up with. And the idea was I wanted to try to fix myself because something was messed up. And I'm still not there, by the way. I'm definitely not even close. I would say I still have some time to fix it. Well, I guess, let me put it this way. There's plenty of time to improve, right? And I guess I'm not always trying to improve myself. In fact, most of the time I'm not. Most of the time I'm pretty complacent. But then some of the times when I do try to improve myself, usually I try to make changes that apply even during the times that I'm being complacent, so that I'm making one-time changes that have lasting effects. What's an example? Well, I should have put caffeine in here. Why didn't I put caffeine in here or something that plays energy? Well, actually I did, because food. Yeah, caffeine would go into food. Okay, stuff that you ingest, right, is going to have an effect on your health, which has an effect on your energy, which has an effect on your mood, which has an effect on your motivation. Okay, so, and also energy has a direct effect on your, physical allocation. Oh yeah, I didn't see that arrow before. So 4 things affect your physical allocation: motivation, energy, coordination, capacity. Yeah, because you can have the capacity to you can have all your limbs, right? You can have coordination, you know how to swim. You can have motivation, I want to cross the English Channel. But if you have no, energy, it's been a long time since I've taken a biology class, but energy is what's the, something to do with mitochondria, right? I don't even remember that shit. But basically, it's a physical, it's an actual thing inside you. Like if you don't have the physical energy to do something, it doesn't matter how much motivation, coordination, capacity you have, you need the energy. So with that said, like an example of a one-time action you can do to have lasting effects is buy, and I've done this, like, how many? Like 38, I don't remember, a pack of like coffees, like from Amazon, Starbucks coffees. They come in glass jars. And instead of going to Starbucks and getting a coffee once, that would be a one-time action that has a one-time impact. Buy like 40 of them at a time and get the box to your, shipped to your apartment. And then you have a bunch of these coffees just sitting there so that you can just easily take one every morning. Obviously, it runs out after you have 40 of them, but you get the point. It's like, okay, I made a conscious decision to improve my energy for the next 40 days. So now, even if I'm complacent on day 23, I don't have to be as motivated that day to improve my motivation because, I don't have to be motivated enough to drive to Starbucks. All I have to be motivated enough to do is walk to my kitchen and grab a coffee and drink it. It's like, okay, so I have improved the ease of completion, which is going to make it more likely for me to complete that product. I've done complete that task. I said product. I've done a one-time action, order the coffee, which is going to make it easier for me to increase my energy for the next 40 days, even if I'm not super motivated to increase my energy for each of those individual 40 days. I have decreased the effort needed in order to make that happen. So even if my motivation is low on one of those days, it's still going to be easy to make it. There's a good example of a simple one-time action that can have, whose results can be extrapolated past the only one day that you take the action, right? You don't have to sign on to Amazon and order that every single day. You only have to do it once, and it affects multiple days in the future. So there's a good example. Like I try to make lasting strategic changes like that for things that affect my life in different ways over time. But I don't know. Something I could definitely improve on, and something that hopefully you will take away from this and think of some of the factors that I've mentioned and think, okay, how can I improve my health in order to improve my mood and my energy? Because if you're unhealthy, your mood's probably going to suck, both because you are going to feel bad about it and because your energy is going to be low and just your brain isn't going to have enough processing power and all that stuff. So, health is definitely a big one. I would say start there. Directional clarity is important. I would say, if you're an unproductive person, and a lot of times I am unproductive, so don't take this personally, but a lot of times you're not doing anything anyway, so why not literally just take an entire day, push everything off your calendar? Let's be real. If nobody in your life heard from you from a day, most likely it would not be the end of the world. Most people, in a lot of cases, maybe a couple people would notice, depending on if you talk with them frequently. But for the people you don't talk with frequently, nobody would notice. So it's like, okay, take a day on your calendar, maybe next week, and say, this is literally my day. Nothing else is going to happen on this day. Okay? Nobody else is going to get my attention. For all anybody else knows, I just died. I'm gone, right? And you take this day and I would say it's fair to turn off your phone. There's no reason you have to have your phone on. For one day, what are the chances you're going to need it? Probably unlikely. Or maybe, I would say it's fair, just turn off your phone, okay? People say, oh, what exceptions? It's like, listen, whatever, do what you want, but this is my suggestion, right? And probably go to a different spot where you're not used to going. That way your brain doesn't get triggered by the same stimuli that it typically does, from you doing other things. It's like if you're walking around your kitchen and you're used to just eating food when you're in the kitchen, well, if you're going to spend this day in your kitchen, well, you're just going to get caught up eating food. And I'm not saying eating food is something you can't do on this day, but I'm saying that you need to put your attention on yourself. Take this day and think about, what do you want out of your life? And what things do you want to get done? What things do you want to improve about yourself? In what ways Are you deficient mentally? In what ways could you improve the ways that you think about things? In what ways could you improve your behaviors? Maybe the way that you react to other people. In what ways could you improve yourself? And what things do you want to improve about your life? Yeah, and that's another thing too. A lot of, some of this is self-improvement, but not all of it. Like some of it is literally, maybe you are happy with yourself, but you're not very happy with the circumstances around you. Okay, how do you take the self that you're already happy with and take that person and use them to foster that person's power, right? Your energy, your capacity. Let's assume that you have all your limbs and you are able to talk and you are able to write. How do you take that capacity and that coordination and that energy and your cognitive ability and your concentration? How do you take all of that and throw it intensely at the things that you want to get done in order to bring about performance? That is the question. And I think it's fair for you to set a day aside to think about that. And as soon as you do, you'll have the directional clarity. So health, but honestly, maybe start with a day. Just directional clarity. You need some directional clarity. You can't have that, it depends on your schedule. Maybe take a day off work or do it on a weekend. But you need some directional clarity if you want really to do any of this, right? And I don't know. I mean, that's what I would start with. And you know what? I'm not going to post this online, but if someone listening to this is interested to get a picture of the full chart, just go to joshbauer.com/contact and send me a message and I'll get it to you. I'd say that's all I have for today.